The golden light of dawn stretched across the dusty horizon, as Hannah Oliver clutched her swollen belly, collapsing beside the railroad tracks that cut through the heart of the Wyoming Territory. Exhaustion consumed her as she leaned against the wooden railroad tie, her body finally surrendering to the fatigue that had been her constant companion for days. It was 1873, and the promise of a new life in the West had turned into a desperate fight for survival. The morning sun was already climbing high when Kieran Whitaker spotted the unusual shape alongside the tracks. He pulled back on the reins of his chestnut stallion, squinting against the harsh sunlight. As a cattle rancher returning from a delivery in Cheyenne, Kieran had seen his fair share of strange sights, but a pregnant woman at that sleeping unprotected beside the railroad tracks was something altogether different. He dismounted carefully, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the hard, packed earth. His approach was cautious, wary of startling the woman. Her dress was travel-worn, her face smudged with dirt, but even in sleep, there was a delicate beauty to her features that caught his attention. Her chestnut hair had come loose from what must have once been a neat bun, and her hands, though dirty, were small and refined. "Madam," Kieran called softly, keeping his distance. When she didn't stir, he moved closer, concern mounting. "Madam, are you all right?" Hannah's eyelids fluttered, consciousness returning slowly. The world came back in pieces, first the heat, then the uncomfortable hardness beneath her, and finally, the shadow of a man standing over her. Fear jolted through her body as she scrambled to sit up, one hand protective over her belly. "Easy now," Kieran said, his voice gentle as he knelt a respectable distance away. "I mean you no harm, madam. It's not safe for you out here alone." Hannah's throat was parched, her voice cracking as she spoke. "Water, please." Kieran nodded, retrieving his canteen from his saddle. He offered it to her, watching as she drank deeply, the water spilling down her chin in her desperation to quench her thirst. "Thank you," she managed, handing the canteen back to him. I must have fallen asleep. I was trying to reach Sloan." Kieran's eyebrows rose. "Sloan's still 20 miles west of here, madam. You're in no condition to be walking that far." Hannah's shoulders slumped. 20 miles might as well be 1,000 in her condition. She'd been walking for days, ever since the stagecoach driver had refused to take her any further without additional payment money she didn't have. "I have family there," she explained, though the words felt hollow even to her ears. Her cousin in Sloan was her last hope, someone she'd never met but had exchanged letters with. It was a tenuous connection, but the only one she had left since her husband's death. "What's your name?" Kieran asked, his blue eyes assessing her condition with concern. "Hannah Oliver." "Well, Mrs. Oliver, I'm Kieran Whitaker. I have a ranch about 5 miles from here. I can take you there to rest, get some proper food in you, and then help you reach Sloan when you're stronger." Suspicion clouded her features. "Why would you help me?" A small smile played at the corners of Kieran's mouth. "Because it's the right thing to do, and my mother would haunt me from the grave if I left a pregnant woman alone by the railroad tracks." Despite her wariness, Hannah found herself believing him. There was something trustworthy in those blue eyes, something honorable in the way he kept a respectful distance. "I accept your help, Mr. Whitaker," she said finally. "I don't have much choice." Kieran nodded, standing and extending his hand. "Can you stand?" Hannah tried, but her legs trembled beneath her. The days of walking with little food and insufficient water had taken their toll. Seeing her struggle, Kieran hesitated only briefly before stepping forward. "Pardon my forwardness, madam, but you're in no condition to walk." "May I carry you to my horse?" Hannah's pride rebelled at the thought, but practicality won out. She nodded her permission. With gentle movements that belied his rugged appearance, Kieran lifted her into his arms. Hannah was surprised by how safe she felt as he cradled her against his chest, her pregnant belly making the task awkward but not impossible. His strength was evident but controlled, his touch respectful. "My belongings," Hannah protested weakly, gesturing to a small bundle she'd been using as a pillow. "I'll come back for them," Kieran assured her, carrying her to his horse. With careful movements, he helped her onto the saddle before retrieving her meager possessions. Mounting behind her, he secured one arm around her waist to keep her steady. "Hold onto the saddle horn," he instructed. "I'll keep you safe." As they rode away from the tracks, Hannah found herself leaning back against the solid warmth of the stranger who had found her. She didn't know what awaited her at his ranch or whether she would ever make it to Sloan, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. The ride to Kieran's ranch was slow and careful. Each time the horse's gait jostled Hannah, she tensed, and Kieran would immediately slow their pace. What should have been a quick journey stretched into nearly an hour as he navigated the gentlest path possible. "Almost there," Kieran said, his breath warm against her ear. The familiarity should have scandalized her, but in her exhausted state, Hannah could only feel gratitude for the strong arm that kept her from falling. The Whitaker Ranch came into view, a modest but well-maintained property nestled in a small valley. A two-story house stood proudly at its center, with a barn and several outbuildings nearby. Cattle grazed in the distance, and a small creek cut through the western edge of the property. As they approached, a middle-aged man emerged from the barn, surprise evident on his weathered face. "Kieran." "Who have you got there?" he called, hurrying forward to assist as Kieran brought the horse to a stop. "Found her sleeping by the tracks, Hank," Kieran explained. "She's trying to get to Sloan, but she needs rest and food first." Hank nodded, reaching up to help Hannah down while Kieran dismounted. "Mrs. Lily's gonna have a fit when she sees this," he muttered, but there was no malice in his tone. "Mrs. Lily?" Hannah asked, her voice weak. "Our housekeeper," Kieran explained, taking her from Hank's arms. "She runs the household with an iron fist but has the softest heart in Wyoming Territory. She'll fuss over you something fierce." As if summoned by her name, a stout woman with silver-streaked black hair appeared on the porch, her hands on her hips and her expression shifting rapidly from surprise to concern. "Kieran Whitaker. What in heaven's name? She needs help, Mrs. Lily," Kieran interrupted, already carrying Hannah toward the house. "Found her by the tracks trying to get to Sloan." Mrs. Lily's demeanor softened immediately. "Bring her to the guest room. I'll fetch water and clean linens." She disappeared back into the house, already shouting orders at unseen servants. The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly refined. Polished wooden floors, well-crafted furniture, and tasteful decorations spoke of prosperity tempered with practical sensibility. Kieran carried Hannah up a staircase to a spacious bedroom, where Mrs. Lily was already turning down the bedcovers. "Put her here," the housekeeper directed. "Gently now. The poor dear looks half dead from exhaustion." Hannah wanted to protest that she could hear them talking about her, but her strength had entirely fled. As Kieran placed her on the bed, she managed a weak "thank you" before her eyes closed involuntarily. "Rest now," he said, his voice a comforting rumble. "You're safe here." The last thing Hannah was aware of was the feeling of Mrs. Lily removing her shoes and Kieran's footsteps retreating from the room. When Hannah next opened her eyes, the slanting light through the window indicated it was late afternoon. She lay in the most comfortable bed she'd felt in months, clean and dressed in a nightgown that wasn't her own. For a moment, confusion clouded her mind until the memories returned: the railroad tracks, the kind cowboy, the ranch house. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Lily's entrance. The housekeeper carried a tray with a steaming bowl of soup and a cup of tea. "Ah, you're awake," she said, her tone brisk but kind. "How are you feeling, dear?" Hannah pushed herself to a sitting position, surprised at how much better she felt after just a few hours of proper rest. "Much improved, thank you. I'm sorry for the imposition." Mrs. Lilly waved away her apology. "Nonsense. We couldn't very well leave you out there to fend for yourself." She placed the tray across Hannah's lap. "Now eat. You need to keep up your strength for the little one." Hannah obediently began to eat the soup, a rich chicken broth with vegetables that tasted better than anything she could remember. As she ate, Mrs. Lilly bustled around the room, straightening things that didn't need straightening. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of washing your dress. It's drying now, such fine fabric, though terribly travel-worn. And I found your wedding band in your pocket. I've put it in the drawer there for safekeeping." Hannah's hand instinctively went to her bare ring finger. "Thank you. I've lost weight during the journey. It kept slipping off, Mrs." Lily nodded, her expression sympathetic. "Mr. Whitaker told us you're trying to reach family in Sloan, my cousin," Hannah confirmed. "I've never met her, but we've corresponded by letter after my husband died." She trailed off, the grief still raw. "You poor thing, Mrs." Lily said, patting Hannah's hand. "Well, you're welcome to stay here until you're strong enough to continue your journey. Mr. Whitaker has already said as much." Hannah felt a surge of gratitude toward the cowboy who had rescued her. "He's very kind." "That he is," Mrs. Lilly agreed. "One of the finest men in the territory, though don't tell him I said so. It would go straight to his head." Her expression grew more serious. "He lost his wife and baby 5 years ago, childbirth. It nearly destroyed him." Hannah's heart constricted at this revelation. "How awful, Mrs." Lily nodded. "It was a dark time. But he's rebuilt his life, built this ranch into something his father would be proud of. Still, he keeps to himself mostly. Seeing him bring you here, well, it's the first time in years I've seen him show that kind of concern for anyone outside the ranch." Before Hannah could respond, another knock sounded at the door. Kieran himself appeared, clean-shaven now and dressed in fresh clothes. He hovered awkwardly in the doorway. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "Just wanted to check on our guest." "Perfect timing," Mrs. Lilly declared. "I was just telling Mrs. Oliver how welcome she is to stay until she's recovered her strength." "Of course," Kieran agreed, his eyes meeting Hannah's. "No rush at all." Hannah set aside her now empty soup bowl. "I'm extremely grateful, Mr. Whitaker, but I wouldn't want to impose any longer than necessary. Perhaps a day or two." "Whatever you need," Kieran insisted. "The doctor from town will be riding through tomorrow on his usual rounds. I'd like him to check on you if that's all right." The thought of seeing a doctor, a luxury she hadn't been able to afford for months, nearly brought tears to Hannah's eyes. "That would be. Thank you." Mrs. Lilly collected the tray. "I'll bring up some more food in a bit. You should try to sleep more if you can." As the housekeeper bustled out, Kieran lingered. "Mrs. Oliver, I don't mean to pry, but is there someone in Sloan expecting you? Someone we should send word to that you're safe?" Hannah shook her head. "My cousin doesn't know exactly when I was arriving. I wrote to her a month ago that I would be coming, but—" She twisted the bedsheet between her fingers. "The truth is, she might not even recognize me. We've never met in person." Kieran frowned. "And your husband, you mentioned he died," Hannah finished for him. 6 months ago, influenza." Kieran's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss," Mrs. Lilly mentioned. "Well, I understand what it's like to lose someone you love." "She told me about your wife," Hannah said gently. "I'm sorry." A shadow passed over Kieran's face. "It was a long time ago." He cleared his throat. "You should rest. We can talk more tomorrow if you'd like." Hannah nodded, suddenly aware of how tired she still was despite her nap. As Kieran turned to leave, she called after him. Mr. Whitaker, he paused at the door. Yes, thank you for everything. A small smile touched his lips. You're welcome, Mrs. Oliver. The following morning, Hannah woke to bright sunshine and the distant sounds of ranch life, horses neighing, men calling to each other, the lowing of cattle. For a moment she lay still, savoring the comfort of the bed and the novel sensation of safety. A knock at the door preceded Mrs. Lily's entrance with a breakfast tray and Hannah's freshly washed and pressed dress. "Good morning, dear. You're looking better already," the housekeeper declared. "Some color in your cheeks now." Hannah accepted the tray gratefully. "I feel much stronger today." "The doctor should be here around midday," Mrs. Lily informed her as she laid the dress across the foot of the bed. "Mr. Whitaker wanted to know if you felt up to joining him for lunch afterward, or if you'd prefer to eat up here." The thought of proper social interaction after weeks of isolation was appealing. "I'd be happy to join Mr. Whitaker for lunch if he's sure it's no trouble." "No trouble at all. He'll be pleased." Mrs. Lily's eyes twinkled knowingly. "He was up at dawn, giving extra instructions to the cook about lunch, fussing like a hen with one chick if you ask me." Hannah felt her cheeks warm at the implication. "He's simply being a good host." Hum, Mrs. Lily hummed noncommittally. "Well, ring the bell if you need anything. There's a wash basin behind that screen and fresh water in the pitcher." Left alone, Hannah ate her breakfast eggs, bacon, and biscuits with honey, then washed and dressed carefully. Her dress, a once fine blue calico now faded from travel, hung loosely on her frame despite her pregnant belly. She'd lost weight during her journey west, the baby taking what nourishment it could while her own body suffered. The doctor arrived precisely at noon, a kindly older gentleman named Dr. Patterson, who examined her with professional efficiency and grandfatherly concern. "The baby seems healthy," he pronounced after listening to her belly with his stethoscope. "Strong heartbeat. But you, young lady, are suffering from exhaustion and mild malnutrition. I'm prescribing rest, good food, and no travel for at least 2 weeks." Hannah's heart sank. 2 weeks. "But my cousin will still be in Sloan 2 weeks from now," Dr. Patterson interrupted firmly. "Mrs. Oliver, I understand your eagerness to reach your destination, but if you attempt that journey in your current condition, you risk your health and that of your child." His words sobered her. She'd already risked too much, pushing herself to the brink of collapse. "I understand." After the doctor left, Hannah made her way downstairs for the promised lunch with Kieran. She found him waiting in a comfortable dining room, sunlight streaming through large windows that overlooked the ranch yard. He rose immediately upon seeing her. "Mrs. Oliver, I hope the doctor had good news." "The baby is healthy," she confirmed, accepting his assistance into a chair. "But Dr. Patterson has advised against travel for at least 2 weeks." Kieran nodded, taking his own seat. "I suspected as much. You're welcome to stay here as long as needed." "That's very generous, but I can't impose for so long without offering something in return." Hannah's pride wouldn't allow her to accept such charity without reciprocation. "Perhaps I could help Mrs. Lily with household duties, or—" "Absolutely not," Kieran interrupted. "Doctor's orders were rest. Besides, Mrs. Lily would have my hide if I let a pregnant woman work." His expression softened. "Consider it a kindness you'll pass on to someone else when you're able." A young woman served their lunch, a delicious stew with fresh bread and apple preserves. As they ate, Hannah found herself relaxing in Kieran's company. Despite his rugged exterior, he was well-spoken and thoughtful, asking questions about her journey without prying into painful subjects. "Have you always lived in Wyoming Territory?" she asked. Kieran nodded. "Born and raised. My father started this ranch when it was just a few acres and a dream. When he passed 10 years ago, I took over. We've expanded since then." It's impressive, Hannah said sincerely. How many cattle do you run? About 500 head now. Not the biggest spread in the territory, but respectable. Pride colored his voice. What about you? Where are you from originally? Boston, Hannah replied. My husband was a professor at the university there after he died. She swallowed hard. Well, Boston held too many memories, and without Thomas's income, I couldn't afford to stay. Kieran's expression was compassionate. It takes courage to make such a journey, especially in your condition. Or desperation, Hannah said quietly. My cousin's husband owns a dress shop in Sloan. She wrote that they could use help with sewing and such. It's not much, but it's a start. A new beginning, Kieran observed. That's what the West is all about, isn't it? Second chances. Hannah smiled, the first genuine smile in longer than she could remember. I suppose it is. The days at the Whitaker ranch fell into a gentle rhythm. Each morning, Hannah would breakfast in her room, then spend the late morning resting on the wide front porch, watching the ranch activities with increasing interest. Lunches were taken with Kieran when his work allowed, and afternoons were often spent in the company of Mrs. Lily, who proved to be not only an efficient housekeeper, but also a tremendous source of information about Sloan and the surrounding area. Your cousin's dress shop is on Main Street, Mrs. Lily informed her one afternoon as they sat shelling peas. Despite Hannah's protests, Mrs. Lily insisted this activity counted as rest since she could remain seated. Quite popular with the ladies in town. Though between you and me, her husband's a bit of a difficult man, particular about how things are done. Hannah's stomach tightened with anxiety. Is he unkind, Mrs. Lily considered this. Not unkind, no, just rigid, set in his ways. Not everyone's cut out for frontier life, and some who come out here try to make the frontier bend to them instead of the other way around. This wasn't entirely reassuring, but Hannah reminded herself that she had few options. I'm sure it will be fine. Any work is better than none. True enough, Mrs. Lily agreed. Though if you ask me, a woman in your condition shouldn't be working at all until after the baby comes. Hannah sighed. I wish that were possible. Mrs. Lily's shrewd eyes studied her face. You know, Mr. Whitaker mentioned he's been thinking about hiring someone to help with the accounts and correspondence. Ranch this size generates a fair bit of paperwork. Hannah looked up in surprise. Did he really say that? Well, Mrs. Lily hedged, not in so many words. But I've heard him complaining about the ledgers often enough. Man can run a cattle drive with his eyes closed, but give him a column of numbers to add, and he acts like he's been asked to translate Greek. The idea took root in Hannah's mind. She had managed all the household accounts in Boston, and had even assisted Thomas with some of his university correspondence. Perhaps she could offer her services to Kieran as a way to earn her keep while she recovered. That evening, when Kieran joined her on the porch after supper, she broached the subject. Mrs. Lily mentioned you might need help with the ranch accounts, she began cautiously. I'm quite experienced with bookkeeping. My husband always said I had a head for numbers. Kieran looked surprised. Did Mrs. Lily suggest this? Not exactly, Hannah admitted. But I can't continue to accept your hospitality without contributing somehow. My condition doesn't affect my ability to add columns of figures. Kieran seemed to consider this. The books are in a sorry state, he admitted. I've been meaning to hire someone from town to sort them out, but never seem to find the time. Then let me help, Hannah insisted. Just a few hours each day. Dr. Patterson said I needed rest, not complete inactivity. After a moment's hesitation, Kieran nodded. All right, we can try it. But at the first sign of fatigue, you'll stop. Hannah agreed readily, pleased to have found a way to be useful. The next morning, Kieran showed her to a small study off the main parlor, where ledgers and correspondence were stacked in haphazard piles on a sturdy desk. "It's a mess," he acknowledged ruefully. "I'm afraid business matters were always my father's strength, not mine." Hannah surveyed the chaos with a sense of purpose. "I'll have it organized in no time." True to her word, Hannah set to work with methodical efficiency. She created new systems for tracking expenses and income, organized correspondence by date and importance, and began the painstaking process of updating the neglected ledgers. The work was satisfying, giving her days structure and purpose. Kieran was impressed by her progress. "You've done more in 3 days than I managed in 3 months," he admitted when she showed him the newly organized system. "Where did you learn to keep books like this?" "My father was a merchant," Hannah explained. "He believed his daughters should understand business as well as his sons did. It scandalized my mother, but I was always grateful for the knowledge." As the days passed, Hannah found herself looking forward to her conversations with Kieran. He would often join her in the study in the afternoons, ostensibly to answer questions about the ranch operations. But these sessions inevitably evolved into wide-ranging discussions about books, politics, and life in the West. "I never imagined a cattle rancher would be so well-read," Hannah remarked one afternoon after discovering Kieran's familiarity with Dickens. He chuckled. "Winters are long out here. Reading passes the time. My wife used to." He faltered, an old pain flickering across his face. "Tell me about her," Hannah said gently. "If you'd like to." For a moment she thought he would change the subject as he always did when his late wife was mentioned. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. "Her name was Rebecca. We grew up together, childhood sweethearts. Married young, I was 20, she was 18. She loved this land as much as I did, had big dreams for what the ranch could become." A sad smile touched his lips. "She was carrying our first child when the complications started. The doctor tried, but we lost them both." Hannah's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry, Kieran." It was the first time she'd used his first name, the informality slipping out naturally. If he noticed, he gave no indication. "It was a long time ago now," he said quietly. 5 years this October." Hannah hesitated, then shared her own loss. "Thomas and I had been trying for a child for years. When I finally conceived, he was overjoyed. He never lived to see." Her hand rested protectively on her belly. "Sometimes I feel guilty for the joy this baby brings me, knowing Thomas will never meet his child." Kieran reached across the desk, briefly covering her hand with his own. "Your husband would want you to find joy, Hannah, in the baby and in life." The touch, brief as it was, sent an unexpected warmth through Hannah. She withdrew her hand, confused by her reaction. "I hope you're right." By the end of her first week at the ranch, Hannah had made remarkable progress with both the accounts and her health. Color had returned to her cheeks, and the constant fatigue that had plagued her for months had receded. Dr. Patterson, visiting again, was pleased with her improvement. "You're responding well to proper care," he noted. "The baby has shifted position too, that's a good sign. Still, I stand by my recommendation of at least another week before travel." Hannah found herself less disappointed by this verdict than she expected. Life at the Whitaker ranch had become comfortable, the people familiar. Mrs. Lily fussed over her like a mother hen. The ranch hands tipped their hats respectfully when they saw her. And Kieran had become a friend, more than a friend if she was honest with herself. There was a growing awareness between them, an unspoken attraction that both excited and frightened her. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her heart beat faster. Their hands would occasionally brush as they worked together, the brief contact sending tingles up her arm. But she was a pregnant widow, still grieving her husband. And Kieran, for all his kindness, carried his own grief. Whatever spark existed between them was surely just a product of proximity and shared understanding. In another week, she would leave for Sloan, and this interlude would become nothing more than a fond memory, or so she told herself. The second week brought changes to the ranch. A cattle buyer from Chicago arrived to negotiate the purchase of 50 head, keeping Kieran busy with business matters. Hannah continued her work in the study, missing their afternoon conversations, but understanding the demands of the ranch took priority. On the third day of negotiations, a spring storm rolled in, bringing driving rain and sharp winds that rattled the windows of the ranch house. Hannah worked by lamplight as thunder rumbled overhead, the cozy study a stark contrast to the wild weather outside. A knock at the study door drew her attention. Kieran stood there, rain-damp and looking weary. "I thought I'd find you still working," he said, entering and closing the door behind him. "You're as bad as I am about taking breaks." Hannah smiled. "The storm makes for a good working atmosphere." "How are the negotiations going?" Finally concluded, Kieran sighed, dropping into the chair across from her. "Mr. Harper is a stubborn man, but we reached a fair price in the end." "That's wonderful," Hannah said, genuinely pleased for him. "This sale will put the ranch ledgers firmly in the black for the quarter." Kieran looked at her with undisguised admiration. "I don't know how I managed without you, Hannah. You've transformed the chaos into order." The praise warmed her. "I've enjoyed the work. It's good to feel useful again." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the patter of rain against the windows and the occasional rumble of thunder. Hannah was acutely aware of Kieran's presence, the breadth of his shoulders, the strong lines of his face, the way his eyes reflected the lamplight. "Doctor Patterson says I should be well enough to travel to Sloan by the end of the week," she said suddenly, needing to break the intimate silence. Something flickered in Kieran's eyes, disappointment, perhaps. "So soon?" "It will have been 2 weeks, as he recommended," Hannah pointed out, though part of her shared Kieran's reluctance. "Of course," he nodded, his expression carefully neutral now. "I'll arrange for transportation. The stagecoach passes through on Saturday, or I could take you myself if you prefer." The thought of traveling alone with Kieran, spending hours in his company before their final parting, was both appealing and dangerous. "The stagecoach would be fine. I wouldn't want to take you away from the ranch." Kieran looked as if he might argue, but merely nodded. "As you wish." He rose from the chair. "I should let you get back to work." He was almost to the door when Hannah called after him. "Kieran," he turned, an unreadable expression on his face. Hannah faltered, unsure what she had intended to say. "Thank you for everything." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're welcome, Hannah." That night, Hannah lay awake listening to the storm, her thoughts in turmoil. The prospect of leaving the ranch, leaving Kieran, filled her with unexpected sadness. In just 2 weeks, he had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. His kindness, his intelligence, the quiet strength he exuded, all had combined to create feelings she wasn't prepared for. Was it possible to care for someone new so soon after losing Thomas? The guilt was immediate and crushing. Thomas had been her husband, the father of her child. How could she be developing feelings for another man when she still wore her wedding ring? But Thomas was gone, and she was still here, still alive. The baby inside her was evidence of that life continuing. Didn't she deserve a chance at happiness? As Kieran had said, not that it mattered. Even if her feelings were genuine and not merely gratitude confused with attraction, Kieran had given no indication he wanted anything beyond friendship. She was a pregnant widow with no prospects and few skills. He was a successful rancher who could have his pick of eligible women. What could she possibly offer him? With these troubled thoughts, Hannah finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. Morning brought clear skies and renewed determination. Hannah dressed carefully in her freshly laundered dress, which Mrs. Lilly had taken in slightly to accommodate her changed figure. The approaching departure lent urgency to her work, and she spent the day finalizing the organization of the ranch accounts. Kieran was absent for most of the day, supervising repairs to a fence damaged in the storm. Hannah told herself the hollow feeling in her chest wasn't disappointment at his absence. As evening approached, Hannah found herself on the front porch, watching the sun set over the rolling pastures. The storm had left everything washed clean, the colors more vibrant in the golden light of dusk. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. Kieran rode toward the house, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun. There was something graceful about the way he sat, a horse, man and animal moving as one across the landscape. Hannah's breath caught as he dismounted in one fluid motion and handed the reins to a waiting stable boy. He spotted her on the porch and approached, removing his hat as he climbed the steps. "Beautiful evening," he remarked, joining her at the railing. "It is," she agreed, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Everything looks so alive after the rain." Kieran nodded, his gaze sweeping over his land. "This is my favorite time of day, when the work is done and there's nothing to do but appreciate what we've built." "You've built something remarkable here," Hannah said sincerely. "Your father would be proud." A smile touched Kieran's lips. "I'd like to think so." He turned to face her, his expression growing more serious. "Hannah, I've been thinking about your plans to go to Sloan." Her heart skipped a beat. "Oh, I spoke with some people in town who know your cousin's husband. From what I hear, he's—" Kieran hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "He runs a tight ship, expects long hours for little pay, and his views on a woman's place are rather traditional." Hannah's stomach tightened with anxiety. "I see." "I'm not trying to frighten you," Kieran hastened to add. "Just giving you all the information so you can make an informed choice." "I appreciate that," Hannah said, though the news was unsettling. "But I'm not sure what other choice I have. I need work, and they're the only family I have left." Kieran seemed to be wrestling with something. "You could stay here," he said finally, the words coming out in a rush. Hannah stared at him. "What? Stay here?" he repeated more confidently now. "Not as a guest, but as the ranch's official bookkeeper. The position comes with room and board and a salary, a real one." Hope and suspicion warred within her. "Are you offering me a job out of pity, Kieran?" "No," he said firmly. "I'm offering because you're the most qualified person I've ever seen handle those accounts. The ranch needs you." He paused, then added more softly, "I need you." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken emotions. Hannah searched his face, finding sincerity and something more in his blue eyes. "What about after the baby comes?" she asked, voicing her most practical concern. "The offer includes accommodations for both you and the child," Kieran assured her. "There's a small cottage behind the main house. It was built for the foreman, but he prefers to stay in the bunkhouse with the men. It has 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a small parlor. It would be yours for as long as you want it." It was more than she had dared hope for: independence, security, dignified work. But there was still the matter of her growing feelings for this man, feelings that would only deepen if she remained. "And what would people say?" she asked quietly. "A widow living on your property, working for you." Kieran's jaw tightened. "I don't give a damn what people say, but if it concerns you, Mrs. Lilly lives in the main house. Your reputation would be intact." Hannah took a deep breath. "I need to think about it." "Of course," Kieran agreed immediately. "Take all the time you need." The stage coach doesn't leave until Saturday. That night, Hannah barely slept, weighing her options. Sloan offered family connections but uncertain working conditions. The Whitaker ranch offered security and independence, but also the complication of her growing feelings for Kieran. By morning she had made her decision. She found Kieran in the stables, checking the hooves of a chestnut mare. He looked up as she approached, hope and apprehension mingled in his expression. "I'd like to accept your offer," Hannah said without preamble, "if it still stands." Relief and happiness transformed his face. "It does." He stepped away from the horse, coming to stand before her. "You won't regret this, Hannah. I promise you'll be treated fairly and with respect." "I know," she said simply, because she did know. Whatever else was uncertain between them, she trusted Kieran Whitaker completely. The next few days were a flurry of activity, as Hannah moved from her guest room in the main house to the cottage Kieran had mentioned. It was even more charming than he had described, a snug, well-built structure with wide windows that caught the morning light. Mrs. Lilly helped her settle in, providing linens, dishes, and basic foodstuffs to stock the pantry. "It's been empty too long," the housekeeper declared, bustling about the small kitchen. "Needs a woman's touch to make it a proper home." A home. The word resonated with Hannah as she watched Mrs. Lilly arrange cups on a shelf. It had been months since she'd had a place that felt like home, not since selling the Boston apartment after Thomas's death. "There," Mrs. Lilly said with satisfaction, stepping back to admire her work. "Now you just need to add your personal touches. Make it yours." Hannah ran her hand over the smooth surface of the small dining table. "I don't have many personal things left, just a few photographs and letters." Mrs. Lilly's expression softened. "You'll acquire new things in time, dear. That's how a home grows bit by bit, memory by memory." That evening, Hannah sat on the small porch of her new cottage, watching as ranch hands returned from their day's work. The setting sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber. The vastness of Wyoming spread before her like a promise. A familiar figure approached on horseback. Kieran dismounted and tethered his horse to the porch railing, removing his hat as he climbed the 3 steps to join her. "How are you settling in?" he asked, his voice carrying a note of concern. "Very well," Hannah assured him. "The cottage is perfect. I can't thank you enough." Kieran smiled, relief evident in his expression. "I'm glad. I was worried it might be too rustic after Boston." "Boston seems like another lifetime ago," Hannah admitted. "This feels right somehow, like I was meant to find my way here." Something shifted in Kieran's eyes at her words. "Hannah, there's something I should say." He took a deep breath. "When I found you by those tracks, I was just doing what any decent person would do, but these past 2 weeks, getting to know you," he faltered, and Hannah's heart began to race. "Yes," she prompted softly. "I find myself caring for you," Kieran confessed. "More than I should, perhaps, more than is proper given your situation." He hastened to add, "I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted to be honest with you. If it makes you uncomfortable, I'll keep my distance." Hannah's throat felt tight with emotion. "It doesn't make me uncomfortable, it makes me feel less alone." Kieran's expression softened. "You're not alone, not anymore. I care for you too," Hannah admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. "But I'm still grieving Thomas and you." "I understand," Kieran assured her. "There's no rush, Hannah. We both carry the past with us. Maybe in time we can find a future together, if that's what you want." The sincerity in his eyes moved her deeply. "I think I'd like to find out," she whispered. Kieran smiled, and in that moment, Hannah felt something long dormant within her stir to life, hope, not just for survival but for happiness. "For now," Kieran said, standing to leave, "I'll bid you good night. I'll see you tomorrow at the office." Hannah nodded, returning his smile. "I'll be there." As spring deepened into summer, life at the Whitaker ranch settled into a rhythm that suited Hannah perfectly. Mornings were spent in the ranch office. Afternoons often found her resting in her cottage or sitting on the porch with mending or a book, and evenings frequently included supper with Kieran, either at the main house or occasionally at her cottage when Mrs. Lilly sent over a basket. Her pregnancy advanced, her belly growing rounder as the baby thrived under the improved conditions. Dr. Patterson, visiting monthly now, pronounced both mother and child in excellent health. "You've made a remarkable recovery," he told Hannah during a July examination. "I'd estimate the baby will arrive in late September or early October." The prospect of childbirth without Thomas was still daunting, but Hannah no longer felt the paralyzing fear that had gripped her during her journey west. She had support now, Mrs. Lilly's motherly guidance, Dr. Patterson's medical expertise, and most importantly, Kieran's steadfast presence. Their relationship had developed slowly, respectfully. Kieran never pushed for more than Hannah was ready to give, content with shared meals, long conversations, and occasional walks around the ranch property. Sometimes their hands would touch, or he would help her navigate a rough patch of ground, his strong arm supporting her. Each small contact sent warmth through Hannah's body, a reminder that she was still young, still alive, still capable of feeling. One warm August evening, they sat on the cottage porch watching a spectacular sunset. Hannah's sewing lay forgotten in her lap as she admired the vibrant colors streaking the sky. "I never knew the sky could look like this," she mused. "In Boston, the buildings blocked most of the horizon." Kieran smiled. "That's one of the things I love about this country. The sky goes on forever." "It makes a person feel small," Hannah observed, "but not in a bad way, more like a reminder that our troubles are just one tiny part of something much larger." "That's a profound thought," Kieran said, studying her profile in the fading light. "You're a remarkable woman, Hannah Oliver." She turned to him, warmed by the admiration in his voice. "Not so remarkable, just trying to make my way the best I can." "No, you are remarkable," Kieran insisted. "You faced loss, hardship, an uncertain future with a baby coming, and yet you never complain. You work hard, you've made a place for yourself here, you've—" He hesitated, then finished softly. "You've brought life back to this ranch. And to me." Hannah's breath caught at the naked emotion in his eyes. "Kieran, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know you're still healing, still preparing for the baby, but I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. I care deeply for you, Hannah." Tears pricked at her eyes. "I care for you too," she whispered. The admission felt both terrifying and right. "More than I thought possible." Kieran reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "Then we'll take it one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations." Hannah nodded, twining her fingers with his. They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared. As her due date approached, Hannah found herself increasingly anxious. The ranch was 20 miles from town, and while Dr. Patterson had promised to stay nearby in the final weeks, the isolation worried her. What if something went wrong, as it had with Kieran's wife? She confessed these fears to Mrs. Lilly one afternoon as they prepared baby clothes in the cottage. "Every first-time mother has those worries," Mrs. Lilly assured her, expertly folding a tiny nightgown. "But you're healthy, the baby's healthy, and Dr. Patterson knows what he's doing." "I know," Hannah sighed, rubbing her lower back where an ache had settled. "It's just, after what happened with Rebecca." Mrs. Lilly's hand stilled. "That was different. Rebecca had problems from the beginning. She was never as strong as you are. And the doctor back then wasn't half as competent as Dr. Patterson." Hannah nodded, trying to take comfort in the older woman's words. Still, the fear lingered, a shadow at the edges of her mind. That evening, she broached the subject with Kieran as they walked slowly around the yard, a nightly ritual recommended by Dr. Patterson to help her sleep. "I've been thinking," she began hesitantly. "Perhaps I should move into town for the last few weeks, to be closer to the doctor." Kieran's brow furrowed with concern. "Are you feeling unwell?" "No, nothing like that," Hannah hastened to assure him. "Just worried about being so far from help if something happens quickly." Understanding dawned in Kieran's eyes. "You're thinking about Rebecca." Hannah nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to bring up painful memories." "Hannah, look at me," Kieran said gently, stopping their walk and turning to face her. When she reluctantly met his eyes, he continued, "What happened to Rebecca was a tragedy, but it doesn't mean the same fate awaits you. You're different women with different circumstances." "I know that rationally," Hannah admitted, "but fear isn't rational." Kieran considered for a moment. "What if we compromise? Dr. Patterson has already agreed to stay at the ranch for the week around your due date, and I can have a wagon ready at all times with the fastest horses in case we need to get to town quickly." The thoughtfulness of his plan eased some of Hannah's anxiety. "That sounds reasonable. And," Kieran added, his voice softening, "I promise I'll be right here with you, every step of the way." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Hannah's eyes. "Thank you." Impulsively, she reached up and pressed her palm to his cheek. Kieran covered her hand with his own, turning his face slightly to kiss her palm. The gentle gesture sent warmth spreading through Hannah's body. "We should head back," she said softly. "It's getting dark." Kieran nodded, but before they resumed walking, he surprised her by leaning down and placing a gentle, brief kiss on her lips. It was their first kiss, chaste but full of promise. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted with a small smile. Hannah's heart fluttered. "I've been wanting you to." Their return walk to the cottage was filled with a new awareness, a sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. When they reached her door, Kieran kissed her once more, a lingering goodnight that left Hannah breathless. "Sleep well," he murmured before reluctantly departing. That night, as Hannah prepared for bed, she found herself touching her lips, remembering the feel of Kieran's kiss. For the first time since Thomas's death, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included love again, a different love, but no less real for being different. Her hand moved to her wedding ring, which she still wore on a chain around her neck. "I'll always love you, Thomas," she whispered to the empty room, "but I think it's time to open my heart again." With that quiet acknowledgement, Hannah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The path ahead was still uncertain, but she no longer faced it alone. September arrived with cooler temperatures and golden light. Dr. Patterson moved into a spare room at the main house, ready to attend Hannah at the first sign of labor. The waiting game had begun, and Hannah found herself increasingly restless. "Try to enjoy these last quiet days, Mrs. Lilly advised. "Once that baby arrives, quiet will be a distant memory." Hannah took the advice to heart, spending her mornings keeping the ranch books up to date and her afternoons preparing the cottage for the baby's arrival. Kieran had arranged for a beautiful cradle to be built by a carpenter in town, a gesture that had moved Hannah to tears when he presented it to her. Their relationship had deepened since that first kiss. Each evening brought tender moments holding hands as they walked, sharing kisses in the privacy of the cottage porch, talking about their hopes and dreams. They spoke carefully around the future, neither wanting to presume too much, but Hannah could feel the unspoken promise between them growing stronger. On a crisp morning in late September, Hannah woke to a dull ache in her lower back. She thought little of it at first. Backaches had become a constant companion in the final weeks of pregnancy. But as the morning progressed, the pain began to come in waves, intensifying before receding. By midday, she could no longer deny what was happening. She sent word to the main house, and within minutes, Mrs. Lilly and Dr. Patterson were at the cottage. "It's time," the doctor confirmed after a brief examination. "First babies often take their time, though. I expect we're in for a long wait." Mrs. Lilly took charge, sending a ranch hand to fetch Kieran from the north pasture where he was working with the cattle. "No sense him wearing a hole in the porch waiting," she declared. "Better he keeps busy until things progress further." The labor was indeed long hours stretching into the evening and then the night. Hannah walked when she could, rested when she couldn't, and endured the increasingly powerful contractions with a determination born of necessity. Near midnight, Kieran arrived at the cottage, his face etched with concern. "Hannah," he called from the front room. Mrs. Lilly intercepted him before he could enter the bedroom. "She's doing fine," the housekeeper assured him. "Everything's progressing normally. Can I see her?" Kieran asked, his voice strained. After a moment's hesitation, Mrs. Lilly nodded. Briefly. She could use the encouragement. When Kieran entered the bedroom, Hannah was sitting up in bed, her face flushed with exertion, her hair damp with sweat. Despite her obvious discomfort, she managed a smile when she saw him. "You came," she said, reaching for his hand. "Wild horses couldn't have kept me away," Kieran replied, taking her hand and squeezing gently. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better," Hannah admitted with a weak laugh that turned into a grimace as another contraction began. Kieran watched helplessly as she breathed through the pain, her hand tightening around his. When it passed, he brushed damp hair from her forehead. "You're the strongest person I know, Hannah Oliver. You can do this." His confidence gave her strength. "Stay close by, even if you can't be in here. I'll be right outside," Kieran promised. "Every minute." True to his word, Kieran remained on the cottage porch all night, pacing as Hannah's cries occasionally reached him through the closed door. Ranch hands came and went, bringing coffee and food he barely touched, offering awkward words of encouragement. As dawn broke over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, a new sound cut through the morning stillness, the lusty cry of a newborn baby. Kieran froze mid-pace, his heart hammering in his chest. Minutes that felt like hours passed before the cottage door finally opened and Dr. Patterson emerged, looking tired but satisfied. "Congratulations," the doctor said with a broad smile. "Mother and son are doing just fine." "A boy," Kieran whispered, emotion making his voice rough. "Doctor." Patterson nodded. "A healthy boy with a good set of lungs. You can go in now if you'd like. Just for a few minutes, they both need rest." Kieran entered the cottage on unsteady legs. In the bedroom, Hannah sat propped against pillows, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked exhausted but radiant, a soft smile on her lips as she gazed down at her son. She looked up as Kieran approached. "Look what I made," she said softly, pulling back the blanket slightly to reveal a tiny face with a shock of dark hair. Kieran's breath caught in his throat. "He's perfect," he managed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "Just like his mother." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "I wish Thomas could have seen him. He would have been so proud," Kieran said sincerely, understanding her need to acknowledge her late husband in this moment. Hannah studied her son's face. "I'm going to name him Thomas Kieran Oliver, after both the men who gave him life, one who created him and one who ensured we survived to meet him." Kieran was stunned by the gesture. "Hannah, are you sure?" She nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything." Her expression grew serious. "Kieran, when you found me by those tracks, I was at the end of my strength, my hope. You didn't just save my life that day, you gave me back my future." Overwhelmed with emotion, Kieran could only take her hand and press it to his lips. They sat in companionable silence, watching the newborn sleep. until Mrs. Lilly shooed Kieran out so mother and baby could rest. The days following Thomas's birth were a blur of exhaustion and joy for Hannah. The baby proved to have a healthy appetite and strong lungs, making his needs known at all hours. Mrs. Lilly was an invaluable help, showing Hannah how to swaddle, bathe, and comfort her son. Kieran visited every day, usually in the evening when ranch work was done. He would sit with Hannah, sometimes holding the baby while she ate or rested. The sight of the big, rugged cowboy cradling her tiny son with such gentleness never failed to touch Hannah's heart. 2 weeks after Thomas's birth, on a warm October evening, Kieran arrived at the cottage with a small package in hand. "A gift for the little one," he explained, presenting it to Hannah as they sat on the porch, the baby sleeping in a basket nearby. Hannah unwrapped the package to find a beautifully carved wooden horse. "Kieran, it's lovely," she said, running her fingers over the smooth curves and details. "My father made one for me when I was born," Kieran explained. "I thought Thomas should have one too." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Hannah deeply. "You're becoming very important to him," she said softly, "to both of us." Kieran's expression grew serious. "Hannah, there's something I need to ask you." He took a deep breath. "These past months have been the happiest I've known in years. You and Thomas have brought joy back into my life, made this place feel like a home again." Hannah's heart began to race as she realized where this conversation was heading. "I know it's soon," Kieran continued, taking her hands in his. "I know you're still healing, still adjusting to motherhood. But I can't imagine my life without you in it now." He met her eyes, his own filled with hope and love. "I'm asking if you might consider someday becoming my wife. Not right away whenever you're ready, but I wanted you to know that's what I hope for." Tears filled Hannah's eyes, but they were tears of happiness. "Kieran Whitaker, are you proposing to me?" A smile tugged at his lips. "I suppose I am, though not very elegantly." Hannah squeezed his hands. "I don't need elegance, I just need you." She took a deep breath. "Yes. Not right away, as you said, but yes. When the time is right, I would be honored to be your wife." The joy that transformed Kieran's face was a sight to behold. He leaned forward and kissed her, a kiss full of promise and future and hope. When they broke apart, Hannah rested her forehead against his. "I never expected to find love again," she whispered. "Especially not by falling asleep beside some railroad tracks." Kieran chuckled softly. "And I never expected to find my future while riding fence on a routine morning." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Life has a funny way of leading us where we need to go, doesn't it?" "It certainly does," Hannah agreed, glancing at her sleeping son. "And I'm so grateful it led me here to you." The winter of 1873 was harsh by Wyoming standards, with heavy snow and biting winds. But inside the Whitaker ranch house, where Hannah and Thomas had moved after their December wedding, warmth and happiness prevailed. The wedding had been a small affair, with only the ranch hands, Dr. Patterson, and a few friends from town in attendance. Hannah had worn a simple blue dress that Mrs. Lilly had helped her make, and Thomas Kieran Oliver, now 3 months old, had been held by a beaming Mrs. Lilly throughout the ceremony. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the circuit preacher had declared. And just like that, Hannah Oliver became Hannah Whitaker. Christmas that year was especially joyous, their first as a family. Kieran had cut a pine tree from the North Ridge and set it up in the parlor, where Hannah decorated it with ribbon and pine cones. They exchanged simple gifts, but the greatest gift, they both agreed, was the family they had created together. As Hannah sat by the fire on New Year's Eve, nursing Thomas while Kieran read aloud from Dickens, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the depths of despair beside those railroad tracks to this perfect contentment, It seemed almost miraculous. "Penny for your thoughts," Kieran said, noticing her distraction. Hannah smiled. "I was just thinking about how much can change in a year. Last winter I was alone and terrified in Boston, grieving Thomas and facing an uncertain future. Now, Kieran prompted when she trailed off. "Now I have everything I never dared to hope for," Hannah finished softly. "A home, a family, love." Kieran set aside his book and moved to kneel beside her chair. "You've given me the same gifts," he told her, his voice husky with emotion. "You and this little one." He stroked Thomas's downy head gently. "You've made my house a home again, Hannah." The baby, finished with his meal, gave a contented sigh. Hannah adjusted her clothing and shifted Thomas to her shoulder, patting his back gently. "I think he's ready for bed," she observed as his eyelids drooped. "I'll take him up," Kieran offered, carefully taking the drowsy infant from her arms. "Meet you upstairs in a bit," Hannah nodded, watching with a full heart as her husband carried their son up to the nursery. "Our son," she corrected herself. For Kieran had insisted from the moment they married that Thomas was as much his son as if he'd helped create him. When Kieran returned, he extended his hand to help Hannah from her chair. "Happy New Year, Mrs. Whitaker," he said, drawing her into his arms. "The first of many to come." "Many indeed," Hannah agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "I love you, Kieran Whitaker." "And I love you, Hannah Whitaker, more than I can say." As they ascended the stairs together, hand in hand, Hannah sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever force had guided her to those railroad tracks on that fateful day. What had seemed like the lowest point of her journey had, in fact, been the beginning of her greatest adventure, an adventure of love, family, and second chances in the wild heart of Wyoming. Spring came early to Wyoming in 1874, bringing green grass, wildflowers, and new calves to the Whitaker ranch. Thomas, now 7 months old, was crawling everywhere, keeping Hannah and Mrs. Lilly constantly vigilant. His dark hair had a slight curl to it, and his eyes had settled into a deep brown that reminded Hannah of his father, his first father, the professor from Boston who would have been so proud of his son's curious nature and quick smile. Kieran proved to be a natural father, patient and loving with the boy who carried his name. He would often return from working the cattle with a wildflower or interesting rock for Thomas, explaining its properties to the baby as seriously as if the child could understand every word. These little lessons never failed to make Hannah smile. "He's going to be the most educated cowboy in Wyoming if you keep this up," she teased one evening as Kieran showed Thomas the workings of a pocket watch. "Nothing wrong with being a cowboy who knows things," Kieran replied with a wink. "Besides, with your brains and his natural curiosity, I suspect he might follow more in his first father's footsteps than mine." The casual way Kieran acknowledged and honored Thomas's origins was one of the many reasons Hannah loved him. There was no jealousy, no attempt to replace the man who had given Thomas life, only respect, and a genuine desire to keep that legacy alive for the boy. As the ranch flourished under their combined management, Hannah's careful bookkeeping allowing for strategic expansions of both land and cattle, so too did their family life. The main house, once so empty and quiet after Rebecca's death, now rang with laughter and the pattering of little feet as Thomas mastered walking, then running, much to everyone's exhaustion. "That boy moves faster than a jackrabbit," Hank complained good-naturedly after Thomas managed to escape the house and make it halfway to the corral before being caught. "Got your determination, Mrs. Whitaker, and the boss's long legs." Hannah laughed, scooping up her squirming son. "He's his own person already, Hank. Heaven help us all when he's a teenager." By Thomas's first birthday, in September 1874, the Whitaker Ranch had become one of the most successful operations in the county. Kieran's fair business practices and Hannah's efficient management had earned them a reputation that brought buyers from as far away as Chicago and St. Louis. The birthday celebration was a ranch-wide affair, with all the hands and their families joining in. Mrs. Lilly baked a cake with sugar frosting, Thomas's first taste of such a treat. His delighted expression as he smeared frosting across his face had everyone laughing. That night, after the celebrations were over and Thomas was sleeping soundly in his crib, Hannah and Kieran sat on the porch swing, enjoying the cool evening air. "He's growing so fast," Hannah mused, leaning her head against Kieran's shoulder. "It seems like just yesterday he was that tiny bundle I held in my arms for the first time." Kieran agreed, his arm tightening around her. "Before we know it, he'll be riding his own horse and helping with the cattle." Hannah smiled at the image. "I think he'd like that." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Finally, Kieran spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "Hannah, what would you think about giving Thomas a brother or sister?" Hannah's heart skipped a beat. They had discussed more children in the abstract, but this was the first concrete mention. "Are you saying you'd like to try for another baby?" Kieran nodded, looking slightly nervous. "If you're ready. I know Thomas is still young, but siblings close in age often form the strongest bonds," Hannah finished for him. She'd been thinking the same thing recently, watching Thomas's growing interest in other children when they visited town. "I think it's a wonderful idea." The smile that spread across Kieran's face warmed her heart. "Really? You're sure?" Hannah turned in his arms to face him. "I'm sure. I love our family and I'd love to see it grow." She kissed him softly. "Besides, you're a wonderful father. Thomas is a lucky boy to have you." Kieran's eyes darkened with emotion. "I'm the lucky one," he murmured, drawing her closer. "You and Thomas. You gave me back my life, Hannah, a life I never thought I'd have again after Rebecca." Hannah stroked his cheek tenderly. "We've both been given second chances." "Maybe that's what makes what we have so precious." "Maybe so," Kieran agreed, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Or maybe it's just you, Hannah Whitaker. You and that remarkable heart of yours." Winter came and went, and with the spring of 1875 came the news Hannah and Kieran had been hoping for another baby was on the way, due in late November. "A Christmas baby, perhaps," Kieran mused, his hand gentle on Hannah's still flat stomach. "Thomas will be just past too old enough to understand a little about being a big brother." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, much easier than her first had been. Hannah maintained her work with the ranch accounts, though Kieran insisted she take more frequent breaks as her condition advanced. "The books won't fall apart if you rest for an afternoon," he would say, gently prying the ledger from her hands and replacing it with a novel or a cup of tea. Thomas, now a talkative toddler with endless energy, was fascinated by his mother's growing belly. "Baby?" he would ask, placing his small hand against it. "My baby." "Your baby brother or sister," Hannah would confirm, helping him feel the movements when the baby kicked. "You're going to be such a good big brother." In early November, with the baby's arrival drawing near, Dr. Patterson once again took up residence at the ranch. The memory of Rebecca's tragedy still lingered, though less prominently now, and both Hannah and Kieran appreciated the doctor's precautionary presence. On the evening of November 20th, with the first snow of the season falling gently outside, Hannah's labor began. Unlike Thomas's birth, which had stretched through a long night, this labor progressed rapidly. "This one's in a hurry, Doctor," Patterson observed as he examined Hannah just 3 hours after the first contractions. Won't be long now. Kieran, permitted to stay in the room this time at Hannah's insistence, held her hand through each contraction, his presence a solid comfort. Mrs. Lily managed Thomas, who had been confused and upset by his mother's pain, but eventually settled when promised he could meet the baby soon. Just after midnight, as November 20th became the 21st, a strong cry announced the arrival of Catherine Rose Whitaker. She was smaller than Thomas had been, but with a full head of auburn hair that promised to be as vibrant as her mother's. "She's beautiful," Kieran whispered, tears in his eyes as he held his daughter for the first time. "Perfect, just like her mother." Hannah watched, her heart full to bursting as her husband cradled their newborn daughter with such tenderness. "She has your eyes, I think," she observed, noting the blue tint that might darken but might just stay that clear, bright shade. "Poor child," Kieran joked, though his voice was thick with emotion. "Let's hope she got your nose at least." The next morning, Mrs. Lily brought a sleepy Thomas to meet his sister. The toddler approached the bed cautiously, eyes wide as he peered at the small bundle in his mother's arms. "Baby?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "Yes, darling," Hannah confirmed. "This is Catherine, your sister. Can you say Catherine?" Thomas tried, producing something closer to Calf-win, which made the adults smile. "Close enough," Kieran chuckled, lifting Thomas onto the bed for a better look. "That's your sister, son. You're going to help take care of her, aren't you?" Thomas nodded solemnly, reaching out one finger to touch Catherine's tiny hand. The baby reflexively grasped his finger, and Thomas's face lit up with wonder. "My baby," he declared with satisfaction. "Yes," Hannah agreed, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. "Our baby, our family." Over the next 5 years, the Whitaker family and ranch continued to flourish. Thomas grew into a thoughtful, curious boy with his first father's intellect and his second father's love of the land. Catherine, called Katie by everyone except her brother, who stubbornly stuck with Calf-win even after he could pronounce her full name properly, was a spirited girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. In 1877, they welcomed another son, James Henry Whitaker, a sturdy baby with a placid temperament who grew into a sweet-natured boy devoted to his older siblings. The 3 children formed a tight-knit trio, Thomas always the protective older brother, Katie the adventurous instigator, and James the peacemaker. By 1880, the Whitaker Ranch had expanded to include over 1,000 acres and nearly 700 head of cattle. Their reputation for fair dealing and quality stock extended throughout the territory and beyond. The small cottage where Hannah had first lived now housed the new foreman and his family, while the main house had been expanded to accommodate the Whitakers' growing brood. On a warm September evening in 1880, as they celebrated Thomas's 7th birthday, Hannah found herself sitting on the porch steps watching Kieran teach Thomas how to properly throw a lariat. Katie, 5 years old and fearless, was determined to try as well, while 3-year-old James was content to sit beside his mother, his head leaning against her arm as he watched his siblings. "Mama," James asked, his voice soft, "tell the story about the tracks." Hannah smiled. It was the children's favorite bedtime tale, how their mother had fallen asleep beside the railroad tracks, and their father had found her and carried her to his horse. "Well," Hannah began, wrapping an arm around her youngest son, "it was a long time ago, before any of you were born. I was very tired and very sad, and I had been walking for days and days." As she recounted the now familiar story, Hannah watched her husband and older children, their laughter carrying across the yard in the golden evening light. The tale had taken on an almost mythical quality for the children, a romantic adventure with a happy ending, which, Hannah supposed, was exactly what it had turned out to be. Kieran looked up, catching her eye across the yard. His smile, the same smile that had reassured her on that long-ago morning, still had the power to warm her from the inside out. He said something to Thomas and Katie, then made his way toward the porch, his gait as easy and confident as it had been the day they met. "Telling the famous railroad story again?" he asked, settling beside her on the steps. "James requested it," Hannah confirmed. "They never tire of hearing how their father rescued their mother." Kieran chuckled, reaching for her hand. Little do they know, their mother rescued their father just as much. The truth of his words resonated deep within Hannah. They had saved each other in all the ways that mattered, from loneliness, from grief, from lives half-lived. "I love you, Kieran Whitaker," Hannah said softly, squeezing his hand. "More with each passing year." "And I love you, Hannah Whitaker," he replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "More than I ever thought possible." As the sun set over the Wyoming horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Hannah looked out over the ranch, their home, their legacy. From the cattle grazing in the distance to the sturdy buildings that housed their family and workers, from the well-maintained fences to the thriving vegetable garden behind the house, everything spoke of care, prosperity, and love. 7 years earlier, desperate and alone, she had collapsed beside those railroad tracks with no hope and no future. Now she sat surrounded by the family she and Kieran had built together, blessed beyond measure. The railroad tracks that had once symbolized her desperation had, in fact, led her exactly where she needed to be. To this land, this man, this life. To a love that had healed them both and given them a second chance at happiness. And for that, Hannah Whitaker would be forever grateful.